faith, spiritual values, moral issues, government, economy, education, work, responsibility. What we think about these depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Radio with Brannon House.
And welcome to the broadcast. Glad you guys are with us on this Monday, February 24th, 2025. I said to the missus last night, can you believe it's almost March? And her response is, thank you, Lord. She's not a winter person. And I keep reminding her, honey, we don't have winter down here. I know you think it's winter down here in Tennessee, but the good folks in Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota would very much disagree. We don't have winter. We just have a rather chilly fall. That's what it is. But she is indeed an outdoors person. So she's well, you know what you saw yesterday? She's like, oh, that makes me excited. And she pointed and like, what are you pointing at? It was buds on a tree. The trees are budding here. So there you go. It's going to be spring before you know it, folks. Spring before you know it. And we're glad you're with it. And I'm glad it's going to be spring soon because one of my anniversary gifts to my wife this weekend was to shave Dolly. Dolly, our beloved studio dog, Dolly, number 6, my 6th lab, she got her buzz, like a marine haircut. I thought it's a little chilly for that, but she said, that's one of the gifts I want because I'm tired of that dog shedding all over my home. I have to wipe the floors up every day. So she got a haircut, her first one. And like all the other labs, the first haircut went into a Ziploc bag, dated, and put away with all the other ones. Yeah, I know I'm a sentimental guy. I really am. But she's a good girl. All right, I hope you had a great weekend. We had a busy weekend. We're going to be joined by Bill Federer here in just a minute to talk about America's income tax system and why Trump should do away with the IRS and why really our progressive income tax system is pure Marxism. It's really Marxism. We're going to talk about that with Bill Federer. We had a busy weekend. We had our Vault event on Saturday with J.J. Carroll, Todd Bensman, and J.J. Carroll in studio. It's now in the vault, right, Logan? For members at worldviewtube.com/vault. Lots and lots of positive feedback. People saying, so informative. Thank you. A lot of great feedback. People really enjoyed that. They each spoke about 40, 45 minutes each, one at a time. And then we got together, 2 in Studio B down the hall, and then JJ and myself in this studio. We answered your questions. A lot of you emailed in questions that we're watching through the vault. So there you go. What else do I want to tell you? Oh, I did not have my Bible study church service last night because I was losing. Well, first of all, I didn't have as much time to prepare. It's because I had Saturday to deal with the vault event, setting up for that and getting ready for that. But I was losing my voice. I don't know if any of you noticed it last week, but I was struggling with my voice. And I thought, I'm going to go completely hoarse here if I'm not careful. So I really needed to rest the voice. So I did that. And to add to it, another big reason, my wife looked at me with those big blue eyes and said, do you think you could just take off not having your Sunday night service and spend the day with me? That's what she said. Now, guys, how do you say no to that, right? I couldn't say no. I said, yes, sweetheart, I will gladly do that. So we did. We had a great Sunday. Hope you did as well. All right, joining me now is Bill Federer. Bill Federer joins us. I think he's in Dallas at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, also known as NRB. He wrote a book a few years ago about the IRS and the progressive income tax. And folks, many of you, like me, are probably, you were boiling mad already because you knew there was fraud. You knew there was waste, right? I mean, they're already taxing us through inflation. That's a hidden tax. They take our money and they send it to, really Islamic nations all over the world, not to mention other nations that hate us. But now we find out it was going to even bigger amounts. Really, frankly, the $5 trillion we bring in income tax, we pretty much are over the $5 trillion mark now in annual waste. So there's really no reason to tax the American people. And I think at some point, if they don't do away with the IRS, and go to some kind of national sales tax, I think you're going to see a tax revolt. I think people are going to finally say, I'm not doing it. And I think you're going to see class action lawsuits and challenges, and maybe even states suing the federal government that you have no right to enslave our people. Because that's what this is. I thought we did away with slavery. But no, interesting enough, the guy that did away with slavery, Lincoln, actually enslaved the rest of the country with income tax, I think, if I remember correctly. We'll ask Bill. But at some point, the states ought to step up and sue the federal government for penalizing their own people and defend us. The Attorney General of Tennessee, the Attorney General of Texas, they should sue the federal government, say, due to waste, fraud, mismanagement, and all around indentured servitude, we're not going to allow you to tax our people, a federal income tax. We're making federal income tax illegal in the state of Tennessee, in the state of Florida, in the state of Texas. And if you guys come here, IRS, and try to do something about it, we'll arrest any of you and throw you in prison. I mean, I'm serious. It's time to get serious and think outside the box and give us liberty. Let's see what Bill Federer thinks. But I don't think we have to worry too much. I think President Trump, you remember, he was being audited every time he turned around. So I think he hates the IRS about as much as the rest of us. And I think he wants to set businesses free and the economy and Americans. And I think that's going to happen. Now, we also, by the way, got big news last night. Dan Bongino, the former Secret Service agent, Dan Bongino, who had a very, very popular show. He's walking away from a show, I think he had it for about 11 years, to become the deputy FBI director. Now, this gentleman came from the Secret Service. He is going to be the deputy FBI director with no background in the FBI, and I love it. That's what we need. We need some outsiders, some mavericks to bring reform. People that aren't part of the good old boy club inside the agency. And the FBI Association, I guess that's a lot of retired agents or whatnot, I guess they're having a fit. Well, I'm going to deal with that tonight with retired FBI agent David Baldwin. He'll join me tonight to talk about that. But that's good news because I think the FBI should be investigating the IRS agents. I think the FBI has a lot of groups they can investigate and to give us more evidence on the criminality of the FBI, or excuse me, the FBI, but also the IRS. And that it was targeting Christians, targeting conservatives. It's a criminal organization. The whole federal government is largely, absolutely. And the IRS is at the top of it. So good for Dan Bongino. Congratulations to Dan. It takes another competitor off the table, Logan said. Logan said, hey, it's good news for us in more than one way. His listeners are going to have to find someone to listen to now. Hello. Joining me now is Bill Federer. Hello, Bill. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, Brandon. Great to be with you.
Bill, you've lost weight, my friend. Are you jogging? You're running? You're working the treadmill? Are you traveling too much?
I don't eat a whole lot when I travel, but I did notice on the intro, you had pictures of different people, and one was Dr. Andy Woods. And so I spoke at his church on Sunday, and then Saturday spoke at a conference at his church down at Sugarland Bible Church there southwest of Houston. And just a brilliant man, Dr. Andy Woods. And he also had Dr. Randall Price, former Liberty University professor, talking about archaeology in the Middle East, and then also a Olivier Melnick, who is a Messianic Jew that is actually working to stop anti-Semitism. And now you see these Gaza River to the Sea demonstrations all over the world. And it's like, it's coming. So we need to pray and protect Jews, almost like the Schindler's List of rescuing Jews out of Europe. So.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you were there. Those are great people you mentioned, and they've all spoken for us as well. And so that's great you were there. Glad to hear that. Now you're at NRB in Dallas, right?
Right. So,
and by the way, if you have a chance, Bill, look up Yasser Qadhi. If you go over to worldviewreport.com, look this up over there. Let's see if I have it here. I think I do. Here we go. An Islamic enclave in Texas, the urban project that could impose Sharia law near Dallas. Okay, so if you go to worldviewreport.com, look that up. This is a guy that had a mosque about, 2-3 miles down the road from our studio. And of course, our audience knows well about Yasser Qadhi, the Jew-hating, Holocaust-denying, Hitler-defending, jihadi preaching imam we've warned about. They're going to have apparently a Sharia-compliant 402 acres. And we've warned about this extensively now for the last year. Well, apparently the governor of Texas has come out and said, sorry, that would not be consistent with us here in Texas and the law. So we'll see where that goes. But I guess what I'm trying to say is now that you're just not far from there, look it up. If you can drive by, get some footage, we would love to have you back on to talk about what you see. If you have time to go do a little investigation in Plano, if you see anything, let us know. Check it out at worldviewreport.com.
Well, it is a serious issue, and it is happening. And there are lots of neighborhoods where they come in. Down there in the Sugar Land, Texas, there have that issue. And I was up in Buffalo, New York, and they had been telling me about the wealthy Muslims will come into a poor neighborhood and go into the poor person's house and be willing to pay top dollar for their house. And they're doing it house after house, basically buying up the whole neighborhood really cheap. And then they're turning it into an Islamic neighborhood. But but no, that's not the topic of
no, it's not our topic today. But if you go by there and get any footage, let us know. We'd love to play the footage and talk to you about that, because I know you're also an expert on Islam as well. Bill writes on a lot of topics, folks. Islam is definitely one of them. But let's transition to the topic at hand, and that is the IRS and a progressive income tax. The newly minted Commerce Secretary for President Trump has said that President Trump does intend to eliminate the IRS. This is going to be great news for a lot of Americans that are scrambling now to get their taxes ready for April 15th. But it also is going to be great news for you, because you've been you wrote a book some time ago warning that basically the IRS and the progressive income tax was built on the foundation of Karl Marx and communism, correct?
Right. And now a little segue. In Islam, when the Ottoman Empire conquered, they didn't tax themselves. They only taxed the conquered peoples, who were the Christian and Jewish minorities. And over the centuries, they more or less taxed them into oblivion. But they had a jizya tax where you had to ransom your life once a year. And if you ran out of money and couldn't pay it, they sell you into slavery. So there is this concept of taxing is a sign of having dominion over people. But in America, so at the time of the revolution, states had taxes, but the federal government had zero way to raise money. And so George Washington was struggling trying to get money for his troops because the Continental Congress had no authority to do that. Well, when they wrote the Constitution allowed two types of taxes: excise taxes on specific items like salt, tea, tobacco, and tariff taxes called import taxes. And they would set up customs offices. And the first head of the Treasury was Alexander Hamilton. And what was the first thing he did? Create a Coast Guard. They called them revenue cutters. What was that? Well, cutter was the name of a fast ship, and revenue cutters means there are fast ships trying to catch those wanting to bring goods into America without paying the tariff. And so the situation was the tariffs helped the North but hurt the South. So the South was agricultural, and they really didn't have any factories. You had an industrial revolution that took place in England. James Watt, W-A-T-T, and he came up with an invention. They burned coal in England. In Ireland, they burned peat moss, with this mucky mud that they would dry out, and sure enough, it would burn in the fireplace. But in England, they had coal, and they would have to mine for coal, but the mines would fill up with water, and it was dangerous. And so James Watt developed a pump that would pump the water out, that turned into the steam engine, and that could run factories. And so they called it the Industrial Revolution. And in America, we had factories in the North.
Okay, hold right there.
Got
a hard break. Be right back with more. Don't go away, folks. Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview. Welcome Welcome back. Glad you're with us. Worldview Radio, our website, worldviewradio.com. Joining me is Bill Federer of AmericanMinute.com, AmericanMinute.com. Bill, pick it up right there where the hard break took us. Will you please?
Right. So my book is called The Interesting History of Income Tax. The Interesting History of Income Tax. So the North had factories, and they would make textiles, cloth, steel, railroads, guns, and the South was agricultural. And so the tariff taxes made stuff brought in from Europe, England, from their industrialization. They could bring them in cheaper, but the tariffs made the European goods more expensive. And that would cause people to say, well, I don't want to buy this more expensive English-made item, so I'm going to buy it from the northern factories. So the North loved tariff taxes. The problem was that the South didn't have factories to protect, and the South was agricultural. So the South was put in a position of either having to buy more expensive stuff from these new factories in the North or more expensive stuff from Europe because of these tariff taxes. So prior to the Civil War, the big sticking point was Charleston, South Carolina, having to collect the tariffs. And they threatened to stop collecting. So at one point, 90% of the federal government was financed through tariff taxes collected at southern ports. And the South is like, why are we having to foot the bill for? And so that was the animosity that led up to the Civil War. Now, later, Lincoln did a brilliant switch, and he changed the purpose of the war to ending slavery. And so that caused the European powers, especially England, to not recognize the Confederacy because they just had William Wilberforce get rid of slavery in England, and they didn't want to be perceived as wanting to support the South. So that was a brilliant stroke by Lincoln. But nevertheless, Lincoln, when the Civil War started, the North didn't have all that much money, and so he issued greenbacks promising to pay them back after the war. And Lincoln instituted the first emergency income tax. And it raised $750 million, and it financed the North. The South economically ran out of money, and they couldn't buy new guns, and they didn't have factories for new rifles. They were using old musket type stuff. So the Civil War ends, and income tax is repealed. No income tax in America again. And then you have 1892, and they tried pushing through the first peacetime income tax. And the Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional. So you had a lot of German immigrants, and they came from Europe. Karl Marx started Marxism, and this redistribution of wealth and this ideology. So in Europe, you had centuries of elite and then commoners. And Marxism was tear down the elites and we'll have a nice utopia. And that concept came across in America. And so during the industrialization period, you had the Rockefellers with the Standard Oil Company, and you had the J. Paul Gettys and the Flaglers and the Astors and the Carnegie Steel, and you had these industrialists. Now, they did cause the highest growth in standard of living in world history. So instead of women having to spin thread and then weave it into clothes, they could buy a bolt of cloth dirt cheap. And then with plumbing, and then with railroads, you could travel, and then with steel, you could build, higher buildings. And so it was a benefit, but it did concentrate power into the hands of fewer and fewer people. We call them industrialists, but in a sense, they were the globalists of the day. And so when this Marxism came over and people working in factories, they would say, yeah, we need to take from those rich people. And so they tried pushing through an income tax, but the Supreme Court declared income tax unconstitutional in the 1894 case of Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust. And Justice Melville Fuller wrote that there's no emergency like a civil war. He said the original expectation was that the power of direct taxation would be exercised only in extraordinary exigencies, and down to this period, that's the way it was. And then another Supreme Court Justice, Stephen Field, says the income tax under consideration is class legislation. Whenever a distinction is made in the burdens a law imposes or the benefit it confers on any citizen by reason of birth, wealth, religion, is class legislation and leads to abuses. It's similar in character to the English income statute of 1691, which taxed Protestants at one rate, Catholics at double the rate, and then Jews at a third rate. And so no income tax again, but then you had these industrialists, and they're wanting to get a corner on the banking market, and Teddy Roosevelt comes to power. And Teddy Roosevelt, as president, takes on these globalists, these George Soros of the day, the Zuckerbergs, the Bill Gates, the Bezos. He's taking these people on, and so he pushes through the first inheritance tax, because only the extreme wealthy had an inheritance worth taxing, but it went through. So then you have William Howard Taft, the next president. He pushes through a 2% corporate income tax, because only these extreme wealthy have corporate stock. All right, so they're trying to do this Marxism, take from the rich, and then Woodrow Wilson, World War I. It's an emergency, just like the Civil War, and so he pushes through a 1% tax on the top 1% richest people in the country, and the people are like, yeah, tax those Bill Gateses and tax them, just 1% tax. And so this was the tax on the Rockefellers, Carnegies, and the Flaglers, and the Harrimans, and the Mellons, and the J.P. Morgans, and the Schwabs, and so forth. And but they didn't pay the taxes. Why? They started tax-free foundations, and the Carnegie Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation. This way, they could still control their money. They just weren't taxed on it. Wow, how brilliant! They're not rich because they're stupid. They're rich because they know how to make financial decisions. And so then you have Judge Learned Hand. He says anyone may so arrange his affairs that his taxes shall be as low as possible. He is not bound to choose that pattern which will best pay the treasury. There is not even a patriotic duty to increase one's taxes. And now the situation was that churches did not pay taxes. Why? Because churches did all the social work. There was no Woodrow Wilson, FDR. There was no Lyndon Johnson's Great Society welfare state. There was no Social Security. There was no welfare. The church did all the welfare. The church started hospitals. 8 of the 10 largest hospital corporations in America were started by churches. Churches started schools and medical clinics and orphanages and soup kitchens and cared for the widows and the maimed soldiers and the prisoners, the unwed mothers and the shut-ins and the juvenile delinquents. The church did all of that. So they were the social ministries. It wasn't until Lyndon Johnson's Great Society welfare state that the government began to take away those duties from the church. And then the government began to institute them to keep people poor so they would always vote Democrat. It's sort of sad, but that's what they were doing. So the churches did all these social programs so the church didn't pay the taxes. And in the Bible, God gives commands to 5 groups, to individuals, families, business, church, and government. The individuals are commanded to take care of the poor. Family commands are relational. Husbands, love your wives. Children, obey your parents. Business commands are do an honest day's work. Don't hold back wages. The church is commanded to take care of the poor, and immediately they did, feeding the widows and the orphans. There's no command for the government to take care of the poor. The command to the government's the shortest: protect the innocent, punish the guilty. There's no command for the government to be involved in education, to be involved in healthcare, to be involved in any of that. What happened is the government usurped the church's role. And we let them do that because we didn't study our Bibles well enough. Anyway, so income tax. You had something called socialism, and you had tanks and communists, and they would go in and take over countries. And then Antonio Gramsci, the socialist, said, you're not going to defeat the West with tanks. You have to rot it from the inside. And so they came up with something called the Cloward-Piven strategy. Richard Cloward, Francis Piven, they were Columbia University professors, and they said you have to bankrupt the country. You have to have the country spend. Ridiculous. Just spend all the money. Why? Until there's no money left, until the currency is inflated till it's worthless. And then what happens? Then everybody goes to the government and says, help. They say, we'll surrender ourselves to you. You just give us a little welfare check every month. You just take care of us. And you backdoor the country into socialism by dependency. And it's sort of like what if an older fish could tell a younger fish to stay away from shiny things dangling in the water? But they can't. So every new generation of younger fish see the shiny thing and they're caught. Socialism is a shiny thing dangling in the water. Free food, free clothes, free education, free welfare. Free is the most attractive word, right? But there's a hook. You give up control of your life. And so you had Lyndon Johnson's Great Society welfare state intentionally worked at signing up inner cities, minorities, and then Lyndon Johnson changed the immigration quotas. Prior to 1965, most immigrants came from Christian countries where they had a work ethic. They call it the Protestant work ethic. And they would work hard. The welfare program was their extended family and the church. And so immigrants would come over, their extended family would take care of them. They'd all pack into some little apartment and they would pool their money and then they would buy a business and then they would work really hard and they would vote for candidates that would take away as little as possible from their hard-earned wealth. But then you had this socialism, this welfare state come in, and once people get paid by the government, then they would vote for candidates that would continue to let the free money come. It was called the Great Switch. And so if you think of it, imagine if you were getting $1,000 check in the mail every week from someone you didn't know, week after week, $1,000. Would you wake up one day and ask yourself, who's sending me this $1,000 check? I'm going to find out who they are and vote them out of office. Would anybody do that? We'd be like, my kid's got a few more bills to pay. Once you get people to receive free money from you, you can count on their vote. And so Lyndon Johnson said, let's bring in more people from third world countries and let's sign them up for welfare. Let's destabilize the inner cities and sign everybody up for welfare. It's a way to build a Democrat voter base. And so you have the income tax being used as wealth redistribution. You take from your political opponents and you funnel the money to your political supporters. So when the Democrats would get in power, they would tax Republicans and take their money and they would give it out as welfare to Democrats. It's a military strategy. You co-opt your opponent's supply lines. It's like John Paul Jones, the American sailor, would capture British vessels filled full of supplies. And instead of those supplies going to the British soldiers, John Paul Jones would give them to George Washington, right? And so you co-opt your opponent's financial supply lines, take away their money, and then you funnel it to your Democrat voters.
And isn't that what we saw with USAID? Billions and billions of dollars to USAID, taking it from hardworking Americans. And I would think that, I would have to think that, as you just say, you take the money from people, you give it to their enemies or those that are opposed to their worldview. And I would think that since you got a big chunk of the country sitting on welfare or entitlements, that indeed, that's exactly what they're doing. A lot of working people are not for big government. They're not for socialism. That's why they get up and work every day. So that's a very good point. So when I come back, I want to ask you before we open the phone lines, do you think that President Trump will abolish the IRS, particularly since his Commerce Secretary is saying that his goal? Do you think we're going to go to a national sales tax to fund it, or will it be through tariffs? And now I hear the governor of Florida is talking about getting away with eliminating property tax even. Let's talk about all that with Bill Federer, and then we'll get ready to open the phone lines for you to join the conversation. We'll be right back after this break. Hello, I'm Brandon House. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepsid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. MelissaHousebg.com. Welcome back. Bill Federer is our guest, AmericanMinute.com, AmericanMinute.com. Ours, WorldviewTube.com, WorldviewTube.com, and WorldviewRadio.com. All right, Bill. I mean, I don't think the Commerce Secretary would say, yeah, the plan is for President Trump to eliminate the IRS if he wasn't planning on it. So that clearly seems to be the goal. They were harassing him for years. I mean, I remember seeing his tax returns stacked up on the desk a couple feet high, and they've just audited him and harassed him for years, had him in audits that have lasted years and years and years. So he doesn't like the IRS. I don't like the IRS. You don't like the IRS. Most Americans don't. I don't know if most Americans realize it's basically a socialist, Marxist ideology scheme, but they're figuring it out pretty much now that they realize billions and billions have been stolen from them to give to special interest groups, which is what Frederick Bastiat in his classic book, The Law, said. Politicians plunder for themselves or their special interest groups. That's exactly what's happening. So what do you see us doing? A national sales tax? Maybe not even that. Maybe just straight tariffs. Let the outside world fund it. And then what do you make of your Governor DeSantis, saying, I want to eliminate property tax? Again, you got a lot of people flooding to Florida for liberty and freedom. I think more will flood there if there's no property tax.
Yeah, we love DeSantis. He is an absolute tremendous governor. I wanted to pick up, so prior to World War II, you only had the top 1% of the country paying income tax. But Franklin Roosevelt, because of the emergency of the war, expanded it to the entire population. So the same way you had an emergency with Lincoln wartime, the first income tax, but then it's repealed, and then an emergency with Woodrow Wilson, World War I, and the income tax spread. But now under Franklin Roosevelt, it's the largest tax increase in American history. And it goes from the 1% of the population to most of the population. Why? Because an emergency. They actually had slogans: smash the Axis, pay your taxes. Well, guess what? They began to tax everybody, and nobody planned on paying it at the end of the year. And so people like, they get like $5,000 a year. That was the typical salary. And people didn't save up money. And so you had a guy named Beardsley Rummel. He's the chairman of Macy's department store, and he is now the head of the Federal Reserve. And he comes up with the idea of withholding paychecks. So withholding a little bit from everybody's paycheck, right? Once a week or however often they're getting paid. And people don't feel the pain as well. And so here is John F. Kennedy in 1961 said, in meeting the demands of war finance, the individual income tax moved from a selective tax imposed on the wealthy to the means by which the great majority of citizens participate in paying. So here's Democrat Kennedy acknowledging it's this war. And then Beardsley Rummel institutes paycheck withholding. And Kennedy writes this: withholding on wages and salaries was introduced during the war when the income tax was extended to millions of new taxpayers. So every time you see income tax withheld from your paycheck, that goes back to the World War II emergency. And so what happened was, people began to move their factories overseas, and it caused something called outsourcing. So if you're a business owner and you got to pay taxes in America, it's like, hey, I can move my factory overseas and just bring it back into America with low tariffs. And Kennedy writes this, 1961. I've asked the Secretary of Treasury to report whether the present tax laws may be stimulating an undue amount of flow of American capital to industrial countries abroad. In other words, you squeeze the sponge, the water goes out. You raise taxes on people and businesses in America, they're going to move their business overseas. And so Kennedy writes this: in those countries where income taxes are lower than the United States, the ability to defer payment of U.S. tax by retaining income in subsidiary companies provides a tax advantage to companies operating through overseas subsidiaries that is not available to companies operating solely in the United States. And so Kennedy does come up with the idea of a tax cut. And so 1963, Kennedy writes, a tax cut means higher family income, higher business profits, a balanced federal budget. Every taxpayer and his family will have more money left over after taxes for a new car, a new home, new conveniences, education, investment. Every business owner can keep a higher percentage of his profits in his cash register and put it to use expanding his business. And as the national income grows, the federal government will ultimately end up with more revenue. So this idea, if you have more money, you'll spend it. And then the factories will have to hire more people to meet the demand for the more goods, as long as the factory's on American soil. And then everybody's going to benefit. So when we talk income taxes, prior to Woodrow Wilson, or prior to Lincoln, there was none, but then it was repealed. Prior to Woodrow Wilson, there was none. And prior to FDR, only the 1% richest paid, but he's the one who expanded it to everybody. So for a good portion of American history, common individuals did not pay income taxes. It was the tariff taxes on imported goods that paid it. And sure enough, if we can trim away all the fat, all this wasteful spending, then the tariff taxes could indeed help fund the country in a great way. You have many states, Texas, Florida, that does not have a state income tax. So they have, a sales tax and other different type of things, but no income tax. So another quote from Kennedy. I put all this on my website, by the way, but Kennedy said, 1962, November 20th, "It's a paradoxical truth that tax rates are too high and tax revenues too low. And the soundest way to raise government revenues in the long run is to cut tax rates now. Cutting taxes is not to incur a higher budget deficit, but to achieve the more prosperous, expanding economy, which will bring a budget surplus." And so it's common sense, but it's interesting to have Kennedy say this. And of course, Ronald Reagan brought it back, and they called it Reaganomics, but it was actually John F. Kennedy. So in January 24th, 1963, Kennedy said, "Our tax system still siphons out of the private economy too large a share of personal and business purchasing power and reduces the incentive for risk investment effort, thereby aborting our recoveries and stifling our national growth." Now, I want to throw in one more thing. John Maynard Keynes.
Oh, yeah. Good old Fabian socialist, John Maynard Keynes, who said by the continuous process of inflation, we can steal the majority of the people's wealth and not one man in a million will know what we're doing. So that's another hidden tax.
Right. And so he came up with the debt-stimulated economy. And it sounds good on a chalkboard. The government goes in debt to spend money in the private sector to help them create jobs. Those jobs will pay taxes. The taxes will pay off the debt.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, the government when the economy falters, the government becomes a major spender and injects cash, like quantitative easing and whatnot, into the economy.
Right. And the problem is politicians. That the politicians realize if they can funnel money to businesses in their district, they'll get votes. And then they never work on paying it off. And so they kick the can down the road. And every new session of Congress, they would increase the taxes, funnel the money to their businesses in their district, and it kept getting bigger and bigger until now America is the most in-debt nation in world history. All right, so
we're on life support. Is the solution going to be the end of the IRS? Is Donald Trump going to fund it with a sales tax or tariffs? What do you think?
I would definitely think tariffs. And so
you think we may not even have a national sales tax then?
Correct. Yeah.
So can you imagine? Can you imagine with me, Bill, for a moment, if all the money that us taxpayers pay in federal income tax, if that is all eliminated, and there's no sales tax, a national sales tax to replace it, can you imagine the amount of extra income that the business owner is going to have in order to expand their company, hire more people, buy new equipment, build new buildings and factories? I mean, you could have an economic boom in this country that is historic. Could you not?
Right. And then one other thing is get the government out of doing things that the church is supposed to do. So get all the education. Jimmy Carter started the Department of Education, right? And now all they're doing is teaching trans stuff. And
well, yeah. In fact, last week, I think it was Friday's show. People can watch it at worldviewtube.com. We're getting flooded with emails and on social media I came up with the idea last week, and I called Alex and said, what do you think? Come on my show and talk about it. He did last Friday night. I said we should pick a school district, a high school in Tennessee, Texas, or Florida, fire every one of the public school teachers. Just march right in there, fire every one of them, and we replace them with local people in the community, engineer, an architect. They can teach the advanced math, right? A real doctor can teach the health class. A nurse practitioner can teach, the health class. I could do communications. I can do part of history, talk about communism. You could obviously teach in your community, and you could fill out the entire day with real people that have success, not people who have never had success, most of them, never held a job outside of the government paycheck of a teacher. And then you make those people's property tax zero. So if you volunteer for a 50-minute class once a week, your property tax goes to zero. And then the rest of people's property tax drops, down so far, or maybe you find a way to get rid of it altogether like the governor of Florida is doing. But we got flooded with people saying, that is a great idea. Let the experts in their fields come in and teach for free and give them no property tax. And you're getting better teachers, people that really know how to do it, and you get rid of all these liberal teachers that have been brainwashed in our public schools. What do you think of that?
Well, you're brilliant, and it's actually happening in Vancouver, Washington. I was there 2 weeks ago. Heidi St. John. It's called Firmly Planted Homeschool Resource Center. She has this $16 million building that was more or less given to them.
Wow.
CBN did a 700 Club show on it. 1,600 students. They're homeschool students. And the nurse, the mom who's a nurse, she'll teach a biology class. And the dad that's an accountant, he'll teach, the accounting class. And somebody else that's a musician, they have rooms for music, soundproof rooms.
And none of these people that are paid because they're just coming in and volunteering.
Well, what it is that they either are not paid, or you can advertise through the homeschool group that my class will go on for 8 weeks, and it's $25 to take it. But it's just they provide the building, and there's a gymnasium, there's weight rooms, there's craft rooms. It's an enormous building with thousands of square feet. Right there.
Did you say 1,600 students?
1,600 homeschool students, and they're using this thing constantly. Kids going in, kids going out. They're taking their classes. The different parents and their professions are teaching it all. I mean, it's a real miracle.
It is a miracle. Let me ask you this:
Heidi St. John runs it.
Heidi St. John in Vancouver, Washington.
Yeah, Firmly Planted Homeschool Resource Center.
We'll look it up. Before we go to the break, let me give out the number: 1-800-347-9829. Your thoughts, your comments, your questions. 1-800-347-9829. Again, 1-800-347-9829. Your thoughts, your comments, your questions, folks. Real quick, how is your governor going to fund the schools and pave the roads and fund the police fire department if he gets rid of property tax? How's he going to do that? Bill? How's he going to do that?
Well, I think if we get enough sales tax and involve people and cut back the waste, then we can balance the budget and make it all work.
Perfect. Because reality is, having to pay property tax over and over and over is just ridiculous. It really is. I love this. It seems like an economic freedom movement's running through the country. What are your thoughts on all this, folks? 1-800-347-9829. 1-800-347-9829. Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com. Worldviewtalk.com. All right, 1-800-347-9829. Your thoughts, your comments, your questions on our topic today. Very interesting topic, and one I think should spark a lot of phone calls. Let's go to Bernie in Milwaukee, line 2. Hi, Bernie.
Hi, how are you? Good to talk to you again.
You too, Bernie.
Right quick, I'm going to get a copy of this show today, and I am going to share it with everybody that I think I can get it out to, because it's something we all need to know and understand, because that might help us vote a little bit different. But I agree with your guest that all the things that has been presented are new things we need to do. And this is kind of information I really think President Trump needs to hear, because as he's trying to make changes, this input of information can help him fulfill his MAGA agenda. And secondly, Congress, with this information being presented and his attempt to do this, would fight him worse than they are now, because Congress has to understand our deficit is their fault. It's the Congress' fault. It's the Senate fault. They allowed all this mess to go through. It fulfilled their agenda, not the agenda of the American people. You had these bills. You didn't go through them. They told you don't worry about it, because this is what they're going to get for you on the next bill. And at the end of the day, they have been increasing our debt almost $2 trillion every year. And that's why we're where we are, because they said it was $26 trillion when Obama was president. So now we 36. No.
As always, great call, Bernie. We really appreciate you're always calling back in now. You're a new caller. We love it. Thank you. 1-800-347-9829. 1-800-347-9829. One individual that has to have us on speed dial, because she gets through quite a bit. That's our friend Zoe. Hi, Zoe. Thanks for calling in.
Hey,
Line
Brandon.
1. Hi, Zoe.
Hi. I love all your ideas. Now, I want to say, in Illinois, here where I live, we pay like almost 10% of sales tax on everything, almost everything we buy. And that's really hard for some of us. In my
But you also have
situation.
your state income tax on top of that. Now, see, we have like a 9.5% sales tax in Tennessee, but we don't have any state income tax. So I can't imagine paying that high sales tax and the state income tax,
Well,
which is
plus
why
our property taxes are the highest in the country.
Oh, they are. I have
They
family
are.
in Illinois, and I could not believe when I married my wife what they were paying in property tax. I'm like, why would anyone live in Illinois if you can get out of there?
If you can help it, you won't. But
Right.
I wonder what Bill thinks they're going to do about those of us who are on Social Security and we're older. And I don't think that the churches are going to, pick up the whatever. But what do you think?
All
they're
right,
going
what do you
to
think,
do?
Bill? I don't think they're going to cut Medicaid and Social Security and all those things yet. Do you, Bill?
No, I think if they trim away a lot of the other expenses, there'll be plenty there for Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, and all the rest. You know, it's coming out now that most of the aid that we give to Ukraine and other countries, the corrupt leader keeps a little bit and lives nicely, and
They
the rest
can't find half of it. Donald Trump said last week
funneled back.
they
The rest
can't
of it gets
find
funneled
half
back to
the money.
politicians in America.
They can't find half the money we sent him. That's what Donald Trump said last week. They can't find it.
Yeah, and so here we are just throwing away, $4.7 trillion and paying Social Security to people that are, 200 years old. And, there's a Nobel Prize winner economist named James Buchanan in 1980. And he said, okay, when politicians will vote to increase taxes and funnel the tax money to their district because it'll help their reelection. He wins the Nobel Prize for figuring this out. He goes, why are they keep increasing the debt? And it's like, because these politicians want to get elected.
Yeah.
So
In other words, they need your tax money to bribe the special interest groups who will then turn around and vote for them. So they tell all the teachers, we're going to pay you more money. Your results are in the gutter. You're horrible at your job. You stink at your job, most of you. You're liberal, you're woke, you're cultural Marxist, but you're a big enough voting bloc that the politicians cater to you because then your unions, American Federation of Teachers and NEA, tell you to all turn out. And they collect your dues, by the way, and then fund those liberal politicians. So who wants to break up that Ponzi scheme and scam and money laundering and theft? Because the politician benefits from it. So are they going to really vote against that? A lot of them know.
Why hundreds of millions to Planned Parenthood? Why are they getting our tax money?
Exactly. Let's go to Lee, line 4. Hi, Lee.
Yeah, hey, my wife has been teaching now as her career choice for almost 35 years. And she has a minor in homeschooling and another double major for foreign language, German.
Wow.
Anyways, yeah, and so if this goes through, I know she's going to go and respond and say, well, what am I going to do? I mean, I'm sure she could be on board with it, but where is her security to say, geez, that's the only thing I know how to do?
Well, I don't think it is her only thing she knows how to do. Sounds like she's highly educated, can speak, it sounds like a few languages. So I think her resume probably would do her well and make better money than in the teaching profession. What do you say to all the teachers out there who are listening to this right now? What am I going to do? What do you think, Bill?
Well, continue teaching. I mean, I think we can take back the public schools. The kids still need to be taught. There is a growing percentage of homeschoolers and classical schools and Christian schools and all charter schools. They just don't want the ideology indoctrinating their children.
Right.
And so if we take back those things, they can be used for good.
Let's go real quick to John, line 2. Sorry, Bill, real quick. John in Texas, line 2. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Bren. So, yeah, I would say not just homeschooling, but also home churching. Jesus said, freely receive, freely give, and yet it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get your sheepskin. And Abraham Lincoln, our best president, didn't have a sheepskin like that. His is free.
All right. Well, a lot of people are going to homeschooling and home churches. And, a lot of people are wanting to get rid of the big box stores and go more to homegrown, local. It does seem, that the trends are more and more local, Bill.
Right. And decentralization is what the ancient Israel, the Hebrew Republic, each village got to elect their own elders. And so I think we need to take responsibility for ourselves and not allow the government to take our money and take responsibility away from us. And I love Trump wanting to cut back this big deep state blob.
And by the way, real quick question, quick answer, because the music's playing. When they opened Fort Knox, is the gold there? Yes or no?
Yesterday, I was with a guy who worked at Fort Knox. He says there's nothing there. I don't know, but we'll
You
find
heard
out.
it. Bill Federer talked to a guy who worked there. He said there's nothing there. Stay tuned for Crosstalk at vcy.org. Thanks for listening. Take care. Wow. Hey, Bill, did we lose? Is Bill still with us? We got to let Bill go because he has another show to do. But, Bill, you actually talked to a guy that worked there and he said there's no gold there?
Yeah, now that's what he said. He said he didn't think that there was any there. But
I'm not shocked, but to have someone that actually worked there out there saying it. Wow.
Yeah. No, it wasn't verified, but that's what he told me. I could give you the guy's number if you wanted to.
Oh yeah, text it over to me. I'd love to interview him. But President Trump, I guess, is going to go in there in May. You know that, right? This coming May. I guess he and Elon are going in there.
Yeah. So I don't know. But he did work there for like 20 years.
What did he do there? Do you know?
Stephen Amherst.
Okay.
So he goes to Dr. Andy Wood's church.
Huh.
And he does the security there. So he was like my right-hand security man for the 2 days.
Send me his number. Otherwise, I can get it from Dr. Woods. But send me his number. He worked there for 30 years, and he says there's no gold there.
Well, maybe, I don't know if it was 30 years, but he worked there for at least 10 years. And I said, what do you think? Do you think there's gold there? He goes, no.
Wow.
I don't, so I can't say without a doubt, but that's what he said.
Wow.
So,
wow.
So
Well,
I'll text you his number.
Yeah, dude, I know I need to let you go. You have another interview, don't you?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. That's Bill with AmericanMinute.com, AmericanMinute.com. All right. Does Bill know we were still in the air just then, Logan, or not? I don't think he did either. Bill, we were still in the air with our network. BCY went off, but we were still with the network. So I didn't want to let him know that we were still being listened to there. All right. So there you go. Bill Federer checking in today. Hey, folks, if you appreciate that and what we're doing, we didn't stop and sell pickup trucks or soap or a cruise or any of the other stuff, did we? No. But hey, we have to bring in support. So if you appreciate all these interviews we do and the content and the long format we do, we need your support. Please go to worldviewfoundation.com right now and make a contribution. Worldviewfoundation.com. Now, don't forget, coming up April 15th, we're going to be in Milwaukee. Now, here's the issue we got, folks. Listen carefully. Some of you have registered, but you only put in one person. And there's going to be two of you. So we need to know you're bringing your wife with you. You're bringing your husband with you. So, Logan, what do they need to do? If they didn't register their husband or wife, they need to go back in and register them as well, right? You can use the same email and everything. Just drop in their name. So if your name is John Smith and your wife is Shirley Smith, then go back in, register, and put in Shirley Smith. That way we get an accurate count. Because right now, we're thinking, from what we're hearing from some of you, you just registered yourself, and yet you're saying, hey, I'm bringing two people with me. Well, we need to know that, or we're not going to end up with enough chairs. So if you did not register your loved one, you just registered one of you thinking, oh, I'm going to bring her with me or him with me or bring 2 or 3 with me. That's fine. You can do that. But go ahead and register them. Use their name. Use the same email. So you register every time for every person coming. You use the same email address. Just put in their name. Then we have a count. That's all we're trying to do is make sure we have enough chairs. That's April 15th. That's a Tuesday night. We moved the time to 6:30. It was going to be 7. We've backed it up to 6:30. 6:30 to 9:30 because we're adding in Aaron Lavarco. He's going to be in the States, our reporter from Israel. So again, worldviewtube.com/events, worldviewtube.com/events. Okay. Now, remember, our fall national conference is Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. Put Thursday night if you want to join us for the concert, banquet, and keynote speaker. We'll tell you more about that. So book out that Thursday night too. But Friday night and Saturday, that will include, the speakers for that will include, let me get my list. Alex Newman, I know for sure. Mark Mitchell, the lead pollster at Rasmussen, will be with us. Gordon Chang, Chris Martinson, the economist, Chris Martinson, Dr. Lana, Sidney Powell, and myself. What a lineup. There you go. Logan has it on the screen. Seats are going fast. We only have 350 seats. They're gone. That's all we got. Is that we didn't rent a big theater this time. Keeping costs down, and we want to stay in our community. It's a nice theater too, folks. Nice theater. So again, register if you're interested. Worldviewstore.com. Worldviewstore.com. Again, worldviewstore.com. Let me mention one other thing. Please consider going to melissahousebg.com. Now, you know that Melissa, she is the one that brought us Spell of Grace. And she loves it. We love it. 80 clinical trials. I've gotten great results from it. You know she loves the Bella Grace skincare, right? But she is a big believer now in the restorative sleep. She told me yesterday, today, she's taking 2 of these before she goes to sleep. She's not even getting up to go to the ladies' room in the middle of the night. And if she does wake up and roll over, she goes right back to sleep, where she's had an issue of waking up and not being able to get back to sleep, which happened to me at 5:15 this morning, and I've been up since 5:15. So I might need to start taking this as well. But she now is a big believer in this because it's helping her sleep through the night and not be up, in the middle of the night, not able to get back to sleep. MelissaHousebg.com. Get a subscription. Take care.